Thank you very much. It's good to be here today. We've had a bit of a challenging week. Some of you may have mentioned, and I thank you for the prayers. My Bev had to go into hospital. She challenged with some kidney stones, which is a pretty challenging situation, but it seems to be slowly sorting out. I'm doing a little series on the hymns or the Psalms of Ascension. So if you'd like to turn in your Bibles to Psalm 120, and for about, they go right through to 134. These were the songs that the pilgrims used to sing as they went up to mainly to the Passover, to the three main festivals that the Jews went to, like a big camp, for want of a better word, in our context, a big convention. And last week we had a look at how these actually started. I took my troubles to the Lord, cried out to Him, and He answered my prayer. Now here we have these Psalms of Ascension were actually you sort of think, well, why did God tell them that they had to sing these as they went up to Jerusalem? Because they would chant them over and over again. And we reflected on the fact that these were basically a summary of what we need to know and apply in our lives for a successful journey. But as we looked at last week, we noticed that the starting point of a successful journey is to recognize that we're all going to have trouble. And whether we're a Christian or a non-Christian, a believer in God or a non-believer, we all have trouble, don't we? Now, as we looked at, you basically, if you're a non-believer, what do you do with trouble? Yes, you try to escape some way or another, whether it's alcohol or all sorts of types of escape. As far as Richard Dawkins, a non-believer, anti-God, he says, in this universe of blind physical force, some people are going to get hurt, some people are going to get lucky, you don't find any rhyme or reason in it, no justice, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither cares or knows. It just is. Oh, well, that's the reality, isn't it? And then we have the option of taking it to God. Taking it to God. And if we take it to God, we hand it over to Him. And interestingly, in our reflection last week, and we'll notice, he says, if you have a look in 121, I took my troubles to the Lord, I cried out to Him, and He answered my prayer. But then we notice He rescued me from lies, deceptive tongue. And then it says, oh, rescue me, O Lord, from lies and deceptive tongues. How I am suffering in far off Meshech. In pains I live in distant Canaan. I'm tired of living among people who hate peace. Now the interesting thing is, he says, hey, I took my troubles to the Lord and He answers me. But there seems to be a contradiction here, because as you read on in the Psalms, He's still got trouble. Now you think if God answered your prayer when you had trouble, then you wouldn't have any trouble anymore, right? Okay. But He still does. And we basically last week said, well, that's what life is. We can take it to God, we can share it with God, but it doesn't take away the trouble. But it does help us handle it. And we noted from that study that, a major study that was done by, let me see, I've got it here. The Gallup organisation in 150 countries where they studied happiness of people. And what did they find? They found basically people in trouble who were Christian were happier than those who weren't. And I suppose if you're going to have trouble, I think I'd prefer to be happier than sadder, don't you? And that's what God offers. But today I'd like to look at an interesting aspect of finding peace in trouble, and particularly as it relates to people. I suppose not all of our troubles come from people, but a majority of our troubles, I think, come from people. There's so many, I thought, well, I could tell story after story after story after story, but you'd have all your own stories. I think it's summed up in, it's discouraging how many people are shocked by honesty and how few by deceit. You know, there seems to be almost an assumption. I thought, well, yesterday I was looking at the news. My quick news thing is news.com.au. It's free. I go to it. And I flick through here. This is today's. Swimming stars shock heartbreak. Disgraceful fury at a move against Australia. Only way forward for a beleaguered MP. You know, deceit, abuse, lies, what is it? But the news has got it everywhere. Kate's biggest fear about Megan tell-all. Nobody cares, Trump erupts over an article. And on it goes. Megan to make a very serious revelation. Sick and tired, MP blows up over Porter. Aussie billionaire's empire faces collapse. Russell Crowe bakes silence over snub. Photoshop fail exposes American lie. Stokes explains heated Kobe blow-up. What's that all about? You know, I'd say 80-90% of the news is about what? Sinful people, problems in people's lives. And we shouldn't be surprised as Christians, because Genesis chapter 3 and verse 4 tells us the devil said, what? You won't die. God knows that your eyes will be open as soon as you eat it. You'll be like God, knowing good from evil. Was that true? It was deceitful, wasn't it? Taking, like any good lie, he was taking elements of truth and putting it together in a way that deceived. And basically, the Bible just continues to tell us Cain, Abel, and on it goes. Isaac and Esau, you know, that's where all that tension in the Middle East, and what's happening in the Middle East now. There's still fighting and killing. It's just gone on and on and on forever, hasn't it? And that seems to be life. That seems to be situation. So, the psalmist in Psalms 120 verse 5 and 6 says, "Too long I have lived among those who hate peace." Hate peace. So we live in this world where people are surrounded by people that lie, deceive. So what's our solution? Well, as I already pointed out, The psalmist seems to have must be a slightly different solution, because he says, God answered me. I took my trouble to the Lord and God answered me. And yet we have this contradiction that he's got these ongoing problems. So how does God answer you when you talk about your problems when they're still going on? And I suppose at the end of verse 6 and 7, he says, they want war, but I search for peace. Now, if you believe in evolution and evolution drives your life, there is no God, and you've got problems and you want peace, how do you get peace if you're an evolutionist? You win the war. Okay? Fairly simple. The strongest wins. The survival of the what? Fittest. Okay? You win the war. But as we've already noted, in relationships, trying to win the war, just like is going on in the Middle East, how many wars have been fought since Isaac and Esau? Hundreds and thousands of wars. You know, that's what our Sabbath School lesson's on, about the wars in the Middle East, Babylon and Israel, etc. And that's what happens when you try to find peace by winning the war. You might win, but it just keeps going on and on and on. So the question comes, how do we as Christians find peace without winning the war? How do we find peace without winning the war? Well, as we saw last week, the first step is to share it with God, supernatural support. And we've already talked about the sense of well-being that comes in knowing there's a supernatural force there. And we've seen that you're going to be happier because of that. Now, let's have a look at what the psalmist says. Verse 5 and 6 in the verse there, woe to me, I dwell in Meshech and I live amongst the tents of Kendar. Too long I have lived with those who hate peace. Well, Meshech, that's some faraway area down by the Black Sea. In other words, a lost, banished area. So here he's using these figures of speech and he's saying, I feel as if I'm in this lost, banished area. And then he goes on, I lived amongst the tents of Kendar. What were they? Well, Kendar was actually down out in the desert area on the fringes. And the desert was not just flat desert, it's very hilly, like the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And basically these desert dwellers were robbers. They were probably the ones that robbed the Good Samaritan. And they'd come in from their rocky desert area and they'd rob and then pillage and then off they'd go. And it was very hard to chase them out into the desert if you weren't a desert dweller yourself. And so the psalmist is saying, too much of the reality in my life is like living in a far-off, deceitful area. Too often when I look at myself, I seem to be one of them. In fact, if we have a better translation of the Hebrew here, and the New American Standard Bible translates it very close to the original, and it says, for too long my soul has been dwelling with those who hate peace. And I wonder here if the psalmist is struggling like we as Christians sometimes struggle. A self-awareness. Inside, deep down, In reality, I like to win. Just ask my wife. What gets into me sometimes when someone cuts me off along the road? Why have I got to win? It sort of is a worrying reality. I like this little saying. So you're always honest, I said. Aren't you? No, I told him, I'm not. Well, that's good to know, I guess. I'm not saying I'm a liar, I told him, and he raised his eyebrows. But that's not how I meant it always. How do you mean then? I just don't always say what I feel. Why not? Because the truth hurts sometimes. Yeah, he says, but so do lies. And that sort of sums up the struggles we have. And I know as I recognise the feelings inside of myself are part of my problem. A part of the reason I have trouble is because of my attitudes. And I think what is saying here in the psalm, what the psalmist is saying by saying, too long my soul has dwelt in a place with those who hate peace, is the psalmist is saying, as I look at myself, I recognise I am part of the problem. I'm part of the problem. And I'm crying out to God to try and help. And that's where he finishes, I search for peace in verse 7. God, help me change. It's interesting as we look at another one of these psalms. Yes, it's another one. Yes. Self-awareness, with God's help I can change. I want peace. Psalms 139 and verse 23 and 24. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. So he's saying, God, search me. He's sort of saying, help me understand myself. Know my anxious heart. Know my concerns, my stresses. And then lead me in everlasting ways. So here we have the same process, isn't it? This recognizing our challenges and asking God for help. Help me understand myself. When I'm hurt, I naturally want to get even. It's very hurtful when people tell lies about you, and it's just not fair, is it? So what do I naturally tend to do? Well, the way to get even... No, I don't get even, of course. What I do is I share a few home truths. The dictionary tells me that a home truth is an important truth that is unpleasant to acknowledge. Where do I get these truths from? Well, whenever anyone shares a negative thing about the people that have been nasty to me, there's a home truth that needs to be shared. Do I follow Matthew chapter 18, where it says, go if you have a problem with someone, go and talk with them. And if there's still issues, get a few more wise people. No, I don't want to. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to pass on to some others some of the truth about those people so they can be just a little bit careful when they're dealing with that person. Do you understand what I'm saying? And where do I get some of that knowledge from? Well, it's usually second or third hand, and yes, it may be changed a little bit, and I think you get the picture, don't you? I'm attempting to win the war. I'm attempting to try and control the feelings that people to have towards the person that's gossiped against me. And there's a true saying in any community, a true saying in church realities, and is that dysfunctional people attempt to control by raising anxiety levels. So that, you're not going to try and confront them, you're not going to talk to them because, or not go with them, otherwise, everything's going to blow up and things are going to get nasty. Yeah. I want people to be my friend, and I want them to feel a little bit uncomfortable when they're relating to my enemy. But what's the result? The result is what the psalmist said, when I take that approach, he looks and he says, too long my soul has been dwelling with those who hate peace. Because you don't find peace that way. You never find peace by getting even. I suppose the psalmist challenges me because the psalmist says, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. So he's really challenging me, saying, why? Denis, why do you react that way? Why do you react that way? Why when my wife asks me a simple question at home, do I sometimes fly off the handle? If a workmate had asked the same question, I probably would have laughed or just said, oh, that's my secret. Or some sort of, response to their nosiness. I have this challenge. I've got during the week, I wrote to Sandra, my head elder, apologies for last night. Hopefully when you're better, she's sick, and I'm not so uptight, we can have a good chat about such and such. Sandra wrote back, apologies accepted. I hope you have a wonderful day. Unfortunately, you'll be functioning with only half your mind today, as you gave me a good piece of it last night. Sandra, you can never win, can you? But yeah, why do I react? Why do I get, And I suppose if I'm honest, if I'm trying to do what the psalmist says, search me, O God, very often I'm jealous of the success of that person deep down. I feel inadequate, and my inadequacy comes out in that I'm trying to prove myself all the time. I remember in grade 7, we had a maths teacher, and he had this saying that he said again and again, life is a mirror. Life is a mirror. And he would often say it, usually when one of my classmates was criticising or making fun of someone else. And, when they thought about what you see in others, what? Is usually what's in yourself, isn't it? And in fact, It's now a well-known counselling tool that if you actually want to know what the issues are in a person and what they are struggling with about themselves, well, all you do is just listen to them talk about others. And you'll hear themes coming through. Same theme, different people, same theme, different people, same theme. And what are they actually telling you? They're actually telling you about the problems that they've got struggling with themselves, not particularly other people. So, this issue is, I want peace, and part of finding that peace is for me to be able to search and help God to know my heart, test me and know my anxious thoughts. Because when that happens, I then am willing to go to God with my problem. Have you ever tried to help someone that doesn't have a problem? You know what I mean? Everyone else might think they've got a problem. It might be as plain as the nose on the front of your face. But if they don't realise they've got a problem, you can't help them. And that's the reality with us. That's why God says to pray the prayer, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Because in self-awareness, a self-understanding, as the psalmist is saying here, too long I've been dwelling with those who hate peace. Too long my soul has been there. I've been trying to find peace by winning the war. But I want peace, not war. That is the most important step in helping us deal with our problems and find true peace. And then we can take it to God. Then we take it to God, and He promises to help us understand, to change. Because it's only when we become aware of our problem that we're able to change. And God can help us. That's what's so important about confession. God knows what our problem is. And we could just say, like when I was a little boy, sorry when I was naughty, please help me to be a good boy. Well, that's not really confession, that's, When we actually have to say, look, I'm sorry when I was nasty, I'm sorry when I dumped, I'm sorry when then we're in a position where we can then have God work on our hearts and change. Change with God's leading. Change from war to peace. This is a very important, facing up to the fact that too long my soul has been dwelling with those who hate peace. What a difference it can be when we recognise and change. It's recognising why the lies about you hurt from some people, and yet others, we just shrug it off. God helps us recognise the home truths about ourselves that often are the main cause of the problem. By so doing, you truly are searching for peace, and God will answer your prayer just as He answered the psalmist's prayer. Not by taking away people who lie and deceive in your life, but by taking away your need to get involved in the never-ending war of revenge. Helping you find peace inside, really, that's what counts. Some ways, Goldstein in one of his books summed up this in a special way. Above all, don't lie to yourself. The person who lies to themselves and listens to their own lie comes to a point they cannot distinguish the truth within them or around them, and so loses all respect for themselves and for others. And having no respect, they cease to love. Too long my soul had its dwelling with those who hate peace. I took my troubles to the Lord. I cried out to him, and he answered my prayer. They want war, but I search for peace. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts, and lead me in the way everlasting. May you always be honest to yourself and to others, and so have that respect within yourself that you can always truly love. May God bless you. Dear Lord, life can be tough at times, and so often we have trouble and troubles around us, and we get tempted to get trapped into a war of revenge and getting even. But dear Lord, we thank you that you challenge us to look at our own hearts, to look at our own anxious thoughts, and to get a perspective on what our own challenges are. And when we get those challenges and those insecurities in their right place, because of your death and your love for us, we can stand in you. We can stand complete, not concerned about pettiness, and so we don't get trapped in it. And I ask that you'll help each one here in their journey in life this week. As troubles come from deceit, that they may look above that and look for peace in a healthy way for Christ's sake. Amen.